Welcome to the Unplayable Podcast. We are midway through the dead old T20 international series between Australia and England, and we've already got controversy after the first match. I'm Josh Schotterfinger, and I'm joined all the way from Canberra today. In fact, Jack Painter joins us on the Unplayable Podcast because he'll be covering games 2 and 3. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Josh. It's good to be here in the nation's capital, and I was down at Manuka Oval this morning looking superb, even though they've had a lot of rain here. It's ready to go for Wednesday and Friday.
Okay, have you spoken to the curators, the groundsmen? What are we expecting from the Manuka pitch?
I haven't. They were working on it this morning, and the players and coaches had a bit of a look at the surface as well. But I did see a story in the Canberra Times the other day saying the pitch is ready to go. Even they've had so much rain over here in the last little while. I think they've had flood warnings around, but the outfield's looking superb, and the pitch should be ready to go. And hopefully it's another belter like we saw in Perth.
Now, you told me earlier that Ashton Agar was bowling today, which is good because he's coming back from a side injury. How about Mitch Marsh and those sorts of guys? Were they bowling as well?
Mitch Marsh didn't train for too long. We spoke to him this morning, though. He's targeting the warm-up match against India on Monday to return to bowling, which would be the final match before Australia's match before the World Cup, which is good because that means they've got all three of those all-rounders in Glenn Maxwell. Marcus Stoinis returned to bowling at Perth on Sunday, and then Ashton Agar is the only piece in the puzzle left. Whether they fit him into the starting 11 for the tournament opener is another question. But he looked good. He didn't look like he was bowling full tilt today, but he had a hit in the nets as well, and it was hitting them all right. I saw a nice clip off his legs that would have sailed over the square leg boundary. So it looks like he's hitting well, back bowling. So hopefully he's right to go by the start of the World Cup.
Good signs for the WA all-rounder. Now, for these matches, we also get the first choice bowlers back, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood and Zampa, because they missed the trip over to Perth. Glenn Maxwell's also back. And Nathan Ellis, who I'm sure we'll touch on later, was superb in Perth. How much are we going to see the team shift back to the first choice? Or are we going to stay with a couple of these guys who've been filling the gaps, do you reckon?
I asked Mitch Marsh this question today. He's obviously not a selector, but he said he wasn't sure. They've kind of got their 11 settled of who they want to go with that first game against New Zealand on October 22. But whether they show us or the opposition or the rest of the teams in the World Cup is another question. I'd say they'd probably keep a couple of aces up their sleeve, but you should see the bowlers back on this week on Wednesday and Friday. Because don't want to lose too much rhythm ahead of the World Cup. So we might see, Pat Cummins, Josh Hazelwood, and Mitchell Stark back, Adam Zampa as well. We should see a fully fledged bowling lineup for Australia.
And what is the forecast for the next few days in Canberra? This podcast will be coming out on Wednesday morning, so our listeners will have a match this night. What's the forecast look like?
It looks okay. It should be okay for Wednesday's game, I think. Friday, there's a bit of rain around. I'm no expert, but it said on my Bureau of Meteorology app that it was in the morning. So hopefully by the time we're ready to go at 7 o'clock at night, we can get a game away.
A nice little plug for the bomb there. Now, let's go back to Sunday night. It was England who won a high-scoring match by 8 runs over Australia at Perth Stadium. It was a great start for England. Alex Hales and Josh Buttler were on fire at the top of the order. But it would be remiss if I didn't get straight to the big talking point of the day, which was the Matthew Wade Mark Wood incident. People on Twitter were calling it obstructing the field.
Not looking like he's focusing totally on just getting back there, does it? I can't say I know what Matt Wade was thinking, but when that arm went out there...
But Josh Buttler decided not to appeal as the captain. Matthew Wade appeared to shove his left hand in the direction of Mark Wood as he was pursuing the ball. But, Jack, what was your take on the whole events that occurred there in the middle of the Perth Stadium pitch?
It was definitely Matthew Wade making contact with Mark Wood. So there is something there. There's a possibility to appeal, in my view. Whether it is given out is up to the umpires. I think Josh Buttler, being diplomatic as he is, sort of saw the bigger picture and decided, it's not worth doing that at this stage of the tour. Not sure I could have done the same, but I think higher stakes involved, we might have seen an appeal and quite possibly Matthew Wade given out, because you've seen other batters given out for similar incidents. It's in the rules, you can't do it. So yeah, that's probably my take, but it's probably a good result that we're not talking about him being out. We're just talking about the possibility of him being given out, and hopefully it prevents these incidents from occurring in the future, because there's this scope in the rules for a batter to be given out.
Was your take on Josh Butler's comments that if it was a World Cup final, he's definitely appealing?
Yes, I think so, because Matty Wade has that potential at that stage of the innings, and Australia were well on track to win the game at that point too. You've got to remember that. So if that was a World Cup final, Matthew Wade was still out there with David Warner, Australia in a good position to win the game, you'd be doing all you can to take a wicket. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, I mean, the law says the batter is out obstructing the field if, while the ball is in play, he or she willfully attempts to obstruct or distract the fielding side by word or action. Word, I find an interesting one there. So by the letter of the law, he probably could have been given, but there's also a law that states that you have to appeal to be given out, and England just decided not to appeal.
The other question is, now these days with all of the helmet checks, once you get hit in the head and concussion protocols, Matthew Wade was actually hit in the head during that delivery. So whether that would have some weight on the decision, or whether there needs to be a clause written into the rule to kind of account for that, that's another discussion point, I think. So,
well, Marcus Stoinis said that he was a bit dazed after he got hit in the head. I'm not sure if that counts as a valid excuse or not.
Well, he kept batting, didn't he? So can't have been too dazed.
We have seen a few examples of obstructing the field of recent times. There was, of course, Ben Stokes in an ODI against Australia in 2015, where he threw up his left hand when Mitchell Starc threw the ball back at him. He was given out after Australia appealed. Inzamam Ul-Haq, everyone's favourite Pakistani cricketer, was out in an ODI in 2006 after he blocked a throw that was coming in from mid-off, and he was out of his ground. And we also saw Alex Ross back in BBL 07, who sort of changed where he was running, coming back for the second, and was given out. Now, these were all sort of batter getting in the way of the ball examples of obstructing the field, whereas this one was a bit different because you've got a batter potentially getting in the way of a fielder, and so maybe that makes the line a bit harder to draw. What do you reckon? Is it a bit easier when it's just the ball involved?
We should also mention that Matthew Wade was involved in two of those incidents as well. He was wicketkeeper when Ben Stokes hit the ball away, and he was also wicketkeeper when Alex Ross was given out, obstructing the field.
Yeah, so he's got a bit of form.
Yes. He has shoes on the other foot this time, though. I would probably go the other way. I'd say it probably makes it clearer when the fielder is involved, because you can probably determine more who's initiated the contact and sort of if they've sort of changed direction or made contact with the fielder or the bowler. Whereas the Ben Stokes one, if I was batting, I'd feel pretty stiff. Like someone's hurled a ball at you, it's coming close to your face, and you've kind of just instinctively reacted, which is potentially what Wade could have done the other night. Mark Wood's coming at him, doesn't know where the ball is, he's instinctively throwing his arm out. The Inzamam Ul-Haq one is a more clear cut. He was standing maybe a metre out of his crease and he's just blocked the ball, so you can't do that. Alex Ross as well. That one was interesting because it didn't appear on the footage of that game that the fielding side actually appealed, because it was an appeal for a run out because the ball deflected off Matthew Wade's pads after it hit Alex Ross and into the stump. So they were checking the run out, and then the third umpire has decided that he's changed course back towards the stumps and got in the way of the ball. So that's also interesting because, the other night, Josh Butler was asked if he wanted to appeal and he didn't, where in that instance it seems, the third umpire decided because they appealed for the run out, they also appealed for obstructing the field. So
fascinating. If you do want to have a look at that Alex Ross incident, we'll leave a link to it in the episode notes. That was back in early 2018, but still fresh in our memories, clearly. Let's go back to that match. Josh Butler and Alex Hales, as I mentioned, smashed half centuries at the top of England's order. They looked very strong, and after an up and down tour of Pakistan, England now all of a sudden have hit the ground running. A lot of their squad have played a lot of cricket in Australia, actually, whether that's through BBL or internationals, and that's going to hold them in good stead. But maybe the highlight for Australia was Nathan Ellis, 3 for 20 from his 4 overs, and that was, considering England scored over 200, that is a pretty phenomenal effort.
Yeah, he's come a long way, Nathan Ellis, in the space of a couple of years. He made his debut for Australia last year, and then obviously played well in the 100. Sorry, not the 100, the Blast this year. Shame not to see him in that World Cup squad, actually. But yeah, as you mentioned, Alex Hales and Josh Butler, they played superbly. A lot of experience through the Big Bash, playing on Australian grounds, and they just seemed to clear the boundary with ease. I think they probably enjoyed a bit more pace in the wicket compared to what they may have got in Pakistan. And they certainly look good for the World Cup, don't they? It seems like Alex Hales has pipped Phil Salt, another player with Big Bash experience, for that opening spot. There was a bit of concern through their middle order. They kind of sort of fell away a little bit, but they've got some great options still to come back in Liam Livingstone, who I think today we found out that he won't play any of the warm-up matches, but he should be right to go for the World Cup. The big number 1 BBL draft pick. Ben Stokes came back in for his first game as well, so he'll get better with a bit more time in the middle. So they look very strong, don't they, for the World Cup?
They do, yeah. And Mark Wood as well. They're quick bowler, their absolute spearhead. He found going a little bit tough at the start, none for 24 of his first 2 overs, but came back with 2 for 10, I think, in his second spell off his next 2 overs and changed the game for England there. Got a couple of vital wickets, and England eventually held on by 8 runs.
Yeah, it does show, just having a fast bowler who can, and we see it with Mitchell Starc in the Australian side as well, someone who can, get up to 150, just makes a lot of a difference, because the batters don't have time to, set themselves and try and, target certain areas, or they just get a little bit less time to pick up the length of the ball, so it makes it harder. So, yeah, he's definitely an asset for their side. David
Warner got 73 at the top of Australia's order, and he wasn't paired by Aaron Finch, even though we sort of thought that Finch might go back to the top. It was Green this time, but now Aaron Finch has told us after this match that he will definitely be back at the top of the order for the next game. But do we believe him? I mean, there's been a lot of up and down, and where does he bat and what's going to happen? But with Green not in that World Cup squad, you'd assume it's time to get Finch back into the opening slot.
You would think so. Aaron Finch was listed at the top of the team sheet on Sunday, I did notice, and came in at number 4. So they're trying all the tricks, the Australians. But Finch says he's going to go back to the top of the order. I suppose we'll have to wait and see at the toss tomorrow. But I think with them getting all their bowlers back and Stoinis fit and bowling, potentially you may have seen the last of Cam Green for a little while. I don't see why they would play him in these next 3 matches ahead of the warm-up, ahead of the World Cup. If he's not in the squad, he's not going to play. So he is with the squad at the moment. It would just seem counterintuitive for him to play these next 3 games.
Yeah, I agree. And there will be a bit of a squeeze on this Australian middle order. As we've talked for the last 10 months, I suppose, Tim David has moved into that favourite for the number 6 position, which means one of Mitch Marsh, Marcus Stoinis or Steve Smith is likely going to, or potentially Glenn Maxwell is going to make way for him. So these next 2 games are going to be pretty interesting to see how that falls.
Yeah, I think they will. Well, at the moment, Smith has been playing 1 game, plays the next game. So I think tomorrow night is when comes up for, he missed the last game. So potentially he could play tomorrow. And where you bat him is another question. He might be just playing that sliding role. But I imagine they'll all get a bit of game time over the next 3 matches, the 2 against England and the 1 against India at the Gabba on Monday. But yeah, how they line up for the World Cup, it's the question we've been asking since the start of the year, isn't it? Since, Tim David lit up the BBL, then the PSL, then the IPL, and then the Blast, and finally was picked in the Australian squad. We've also all said, got to get him in the side. Who's going to make way for him? And we'll wait and see.
Finally, we're going to find out on October 22 when Australia takes on New Zealand at the SCG to kick off their World Cup campaign. But of course, the season or the tournament proper starts on October 16 down at Geelong, Sri Lanka, taking on, I want to say Namibia.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then the game after that is the Netherlands and the UAE.
Absolutely. So I've just double-checked Sri Lanka and Namibia. We'll kick it off on the 16th of October. So there we go. Now, Cameron Green, you said that he might not be in the Australian side moving forward. Maybe we should just put him on ice, take him to the Sheffield Shield, which kicked off last week. How's that for a segue? Jack, there were 3 matches of the Sheffield Shield round 1 that just took place. WA had a big win over New South Wales by 8 wickets. Queensland had an even bigger win over Tasmania by an innings and 172 runs. And then South Australia hung on for a draw, a very valiant draw on Sunday afternoon. Henry Hunt, a gritty, determined 97 not out, got the Redbacks some points. What did you make of the opening round?
I'm not sure if I'd call putting Cameron Green the Sheffield Shield on ice, but geez, they looked good. The WA boys, didn't they? They just made that look so easy against New South Wales, who, in fairness, probably had one of their fullest strength sides in. Obviously, not having the Australian guys is disadvantage, but they don't expect to have them anyway, such as the strength of their list. But they just made it look so easy. And it wasn't names that we're used to hearing. Cameron Bancroft didn't get any runs. Oh, he did in the second dig, sorry. But missed out in the first digs. Sam Whiteman did as well. Who was their number 3? Hilton Cartwright missed out as well. But it was the young batting prodigy in Teague Wiley who stood up for WA and got him 100 in pretty tough circumstances. So that's quite impressive, and he becomes the youngest player to score 100 since Ricky Ponting did it in 92-93. He did it 3 times in that season, in fact, Ricky Ponting. So perhaps it could be a big season for Teague Wiley.
And I got to say, I did love the century celebration, or lack thereof. He didn't necessarily know that he hit it for 4, but he said that he never takes off his helmet when he scores a century. What's the thinking behind that?
He actually said after the match he didn't hit it either, so 4 leg byes to bring up the 100. But yeah, he said that he doesn't take off his helmet because his dad's always instilled in him, if you get 100, the job's not done. You've got to keep trying to put the team in a good position. So he never wants to over-celebrate by taking the helmet off. Doesn't like the me time, he says, and wants to just keep getting on with the job, which is a good attitude to have for a young fella. Fair to say he's probably going to make a few more hundreds in his time, so I wonder if we'll see a change to that celebration.
Doesn't like the me time. That's not very cricketer-like, is it? I mean, he's playing the wrong sport if he doesn't like the me time.
He actually said he's never played another competitive sport, which I found interesting. He just played cricket his whole life. He's taken up golf recently in the last few years because he's found out that he just needs a bit of an outlet outside of cricket now that he's started to play more professionally. But it's a great young kid, got his head screwed on the right way, and I feel he's going to have a terrific season for WA.
Lance Morris was superb as well. 9 wickets for the match, a career best. 5 for 36 in the first innings, and then 4 for 46 in the second. And he really turned up the heat as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he made a few of their batters really uncomfortable. And he got Dan Hughes out as well, very experienced New South Wales batter. Just got one to sort of leap a little bit. I didn't bounce too much, but it sort of just caught the handle of the bat, balloon to Wiley at short leg, and just the pace. And WA we don't have the speed gun in the Sheffield Shield or the Marsh Cup, unfortunately, just with the broadcast. But WA have their own speed gun they take to every game, and just speaking to a few of their guys, he gets it up around 145 towards 150. Right. He averaged, I think, 144 kilometres per hour during the first New South Wales innings. That was his average speed. And Jai Richardson, who played the Marsh Cup one-day game before that, was getting it up to 147. So that's promising signs for Jai. Geez.
Wow, that's a huge wrap. Quick. So somebody from the high-performance team at WA just takes their own speed gun? Is that how that works?
I think so. They must all the teams have an analyst, right? So that just must be part of their how they look at data and how bowlers are faring. So they just set it up just near, sort of off to the side, near the sight screen, and then it hooks up to a computer where they sit in the dugout, and it just flashes up with the speed each time. I imagine it gets recorded as well, which is how they can work out the averages.
Yeah, right. Tasmania. Now, we've been singing their praises all pre-season, and they started very strongly in the Marsh One Day Cup. However, their first match of the Marsh Sheffield Shield was a big disappointment for them, you'd have to say. They lost, as I said earlier, by an innings and 172 runs to Queensland, and they were bowled out for 147 in the first innings and 139 in the second. Meanwhile, for Queensland, Labuschagne got 127, Pearson got 123, and Burns and Khawaja both got very solid scores as well. So were Queensland just way too good, or was it a bad outing for the Tigers, or a bit of both, maybe?
A bit of both, I think. Very disappointing start for the Tigers. They won't be happy with that. It was a tough pitch to bat on, it looked like. The ball was moving around, but the class of Queensland in Labuschagne, Khawaja, Burns, Jimmy Pearson even, they showed it was possible to bat on it. And, if you just batted time, hung around, didn't look to be too ultra-aggressive, just waited for the right balls, you could bat on it. And, as we know, batting gets easier as the day goes on. The bowlers get tired and they just cashed in at the end of the day. So, very disappointing for the Tigers. And there wasn't much to write home about, apart from Riley Meredith getting a 5-wicket haul. So that was pleasing to see. He bowled with good pace, as he has done in the one-day games as well. So he looks like he's in for a big season.
I also noticed that returning wicketkeeper Mr. Timothy Payne took 5 catches in the early innings as well. So that's a good sign for the Tasmanian side that he's catching well. The commentators were certainly very full of praise for his performance. And player of the match was actually Gurinder Sandhu, 2 for 18 in the first innings and then 5 for 41 in the second. So his rebirth just continues. We thought maybe, he'll just do well for Queensland in the one days, but now he's doing it in the Shield as well.
Yeah, especially since that was probably their full-strength bowling lineup too. They had Nisa in there, and they had Steketee, who bowled really well in the first innings. Missing Swepson, of course, because he was with the Aussie T20 side, but pretty handy replacement in Matthew Kuhnemann. They had a decent bowling lineup in, and they all chipped in. Sandhu with 7 wickets for the match. So he just continues his love affair with Queensland. That's for sure.
We love the G-Man on the Unplayable podcast, that is for sure. And in the final match of the round 1, it was South Australia who hung on for a draw at Karen Rolton Oval against Victoria, who were in the prime position to take this win, but they just couldn't get through Henry Hunt on the last day, who batted all day, and he became only the second South Australian batter, or opening batter, to bat through an entire day 4 after Dan Harris did it in 2011. Thank you to Andrew Ramsey for that wonderful stat. But Will Sutherland, who was a guest on this podcast earlier in the season, was player of the match and was pretty outstanding.
Absolutely. He called it too. He called it on the podcast in September when we spoke to him, was it?
He sure did.
And he said, I want to improve my batting this year. I want to step up to that sort of all-rounder role. And first opportunity he got coming in, the Vicks too, they're in a bit of trouble. 5 for 160 odd, I think, around that mark. And batted a bit of time and then cashed in at the end of the day, and he hit some massive sixes at Karen Rolton Oval, that's for sure. I saw one clip of, forget who the fielder was, but the Redbacks player had to jump the fence, climb up onto the hill, fetch the ball, and then 2 balls later they're going back up there to do it again.
That's quality Shield. Love that. And the Vicks also had some good performances from Marcus Harris, 85 in the first innings and 42 in the second, and Peter Hanscom, maybe a bit of a forgotten man of Australian cricket, but he got 132 in the second innings and looked in full control in that innings, didn't he?
Yeah, all class from Peter Hanscom. The Vicks probably a bit disappointed. They're in a very good position to win that game. I think the pitch just flattened out as time went on at Karen Rolton Oval, and if you're not looking to score, as South Australia weren't for the large part of the 4th day, it makes it hard to get them out. So it ended in a stalemate. But the Vicks look very strong, don't they? And they did that without Pucovski scoring any runs. I think I read a stat that it was possibly the first time he's not made double figures in his Sheffield Shield career, batting both innings. But they've got a very deep batting lineup, especially if Sutherland keep doing what he's doing. But promising signs for Trav Head as well. Got 70 in the first innings along with Alex Carey. That was probably the difference in the game, really, whereas Sutherland went on to get 100. And Hanscom went on to get 100. Those guys didn't. They sort of got out. Fergus O'Neill, the young Victorian debutant, picked up Travis Head both innings for his maiden first-class scalp. So that's an impressive debut for him.
And so the Shield, that will resume at the end of the week on this weekend, I believe, when that all kicks off for round 2. Jack, your movements over the next few days, you'll be in Canberra for both matches?
In Canberra for both matches, and then back to Melbourne for the Shield. Can't get enough cricket. Back at the Junction Oval next week, so looking forward to that. And then obviously we've got some other members of our team who'll follow the squad around during the World Cup. So Louis Cameron will be back on deck on Sunday, I think it is, in Brisbane, along with a few other guys. So we'll keep you covered on cricket.com.au, that's for sure.
We certainly will. Your one-stop shop for everything about Australian cricket is cricket.com.au and the CA Live app. Now, Jack, all the best for the next 2 matches in this dead old T20I series, and we might see a Mancat or something if the controversies continue. And we'll catch you next time on the Unplayable podcast.
Thank you, Josh. Certainly would make it interesting viewing in Canberra if that occurs.